July 24, 1897, the Lewiston Daily Sun, Lewiston, Maine. Illusion of Death, a Massachusetts hypnotist's surprising experiment. Makes a subject undergo the pains of death by the electric chair, rigid as if 2,000 volts had been passed through his body. The innate craving on the part of many people for something new and startling, says the North Adams, Massachusetts correspondent of the Springfield Union, has been abundantly satisfied in the vicinity of North Adams recently by the feats of a professor of hypnotism who has been giving exhibitions there. Most sensational of all is the so-called electrocution test, in which the subject is supposedly made to believe that he is undergoing death by electric shocks. The process is thus described by one who has witnessed it. The sensitive on whom the doctor performs the test is Mr. Dolly, husband of the hypnotic sleeper who passed 22 hours in motionless slumber in Weber Brothers' window. The sensitive simply seats himself on a large chair in the middle of the stage, and the doctor begins his operations, after assuring the audience that no one need fear the result of the test, because he knows just what he can do with the sensitive. After this assurance to the audience, the sensitive is put to sleep, evidently in the usual hypnotic way, by passes over the head and pressure on the eyeball. A few additional manipulations of chafing the sensitive's hands and passes on the shoulders and knees seem to complete the preparation. A manipulation only understood by the hypnotist, and a peculiar one, is the bending forward of the sensitive's head, and with some strength, pulling along on the sensitive's neck toward the head, as if to accomplish a dislocation. Similar pressure is applied under the lower jaw, and the face muscles go through a slight massage-like treatment. The sensitive is in a hypnotic sleep during these manipulations, and when they are completed, he is ordered to open his eyes and fix them on the doctor. Care is evidently taken that the sensitive is able to look fixedly at the doctor without any relaxing of the gaze or dropping of the eyelids. The doctor then tells the sensitive that he has electric wires in his hands, with which he can kill him if he chooses. This announcement to the sensitive is made in a very firm tone, a tone of unmistakable authority, as if the full power to do rested behind the declaration. The sensitive then sits in a very natural position, the hands up toward the chest, as if grasping in each an electrode, and looking very intently on the man who has just said he has the power to kill him. The unconscious sensitive, that is, unconscious to his natural self, but keenly conscious to his new self developed by the hypnotist, lets his eyes follow the executioner as he steps back a few paces from him, and then makes a tiger-like spring toward him, plunging his arms forward and downward, as if he were impelling some invisible force into the condemned man. At the first of these springs, the man perceptibly trembles. At the second, he quivers, as if a slight current agitated his frame. And at the third or fourth, the muscles convulse. The face becomes red, then changes to blue. The head is thrown back rigidly. The eyes take on a death-like stare and seem to be fathomless. The whole frame is shaken with muscle-rending convulsions, and the man bounds from his seat to the floor as if he were in a horrible death agony. His whole frame becomes as fixed and rigid as if 2,000 volts had all his nerves and muscles in their command. The breath comes heavy and slow, and the whole appearance of the man is one of intense strain in every part. The fingers are curved and bent, as if no joint held its place, and the man appears as if he were bound in tragic rigor mortis. The test is then at its height, and after the doctor calls attention to its peculiar phases, a few passes and a word or two brings the sensitive back to earth, and he stops, smiling, to the front of the stage with the doctor, not remembering his terrible nightmare, if it ever registered itself on his brain. April 28, 1902, the Nevada Daily Mail, Nevada, Missouri. Whole family hypnotized. In LaSalle, Illinois, The performer has forgotten the combination. LaSalle, Illinois, April 27. A family of 7 is lying in a comatose condition in the town of Tacona near here as the result of the work of an amateur hypnotist who for 4 days and nights has been trying unsuccessfully to restore his victims to consciousness. The subjects are Ralph Bartig, his wife, and 5 children. The mesmerist is Leo Lenzer, a youth who lives near them. Neighbors, attracted by the quietude about the Bartig home, made an investigation yesterday, which resulted in a confession by Lenzer. He admitted that early in the week he had put the family in a hypnotic state and had lost control of his subjects. Since then, he says, he has spent most of the time in the house, trying in vain to lift the spell under which they rest. The strain has brought him to the verge of nervous prostration. At his earnest request, no physician is allowed to interfere with the Bartigs. Their condition as to pulse and heart is all right. Last night, Lenzer succeeded in partly arousing 2 of the children, and he promises to awaken the other members of the family when he shall have regained his nerve. November 10, 1909, Kentucky New Era, Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Hypnotic subject dies while he is in state of catalepsy. All efforts to revive him fail, and hypnotist is in jail. Statement of physicians. Somerville, New Jersey, November 10. While Arthur Everton, self-styled professor and traveling hypnotist, sobbed in his cell, 3 calm medical men witnessed a weird performance in the morgue of the Somerset Hospital. There, William A. Davenport, secretary to the mayor of Newark and a student of hypnotism, vainly tried to bring back signs of life in the rigid body of Robert Simpson, a former streetcar conductor of Newark, who apparently died after having been put into a hypnotic trance by Everton before a large audience at the Somerville Theater. Davenport failed. Simpson was declared officially dead, and an autopsy was held. Meanwhile, charged with manslaughter, unnerved and shaken, Everton remained in prison, where he must await the action of the grand jury as a sequel to a stage trick familiar throughout this country and abroad. It was at the piteous insistence of Everton, while in jail after his ineffectual attempts to revive Simpson, that Davenport, a friend of Everton, came into the case. Notwithstanding the declarations of physicians that Simpson is dead, Everton pleaded that Davenport be allowed to attempt to revive him. Accordingly, the autopsy, first arranged, was postponed and the student of hypnotism was summoned. Simpson's body, covered with a black cloth, lay in the morgue at the hospital when Davenport arrived. In the presence of Dr. W. H. Long, country physician, Dr. Charles H. Halstead, and Dr. Francis McConaughey, he immediately began his attempt to revive the unfortunate man. First he felt of the body to detect any possible heartbeats. Failing in this, he placed his ear on the victim's chest. Then, evoking the power of suggestion, he spoke in the dead man's ear, but the rigid form failed to respond in the least. Everton has employed counsel and will fight the case. It has been suggested that he will make the novel plea that the man was still alive when the autopsy was performed, citing various cases of suspended animation as proof of this. Dr. John Duncan, Quackenboss, Professor Emeritus of Columbia University, and one of the leading authorities on hypnotism in the country, said it was not unlikely that Simpson's case was a case of suspended animation, and that an autopsy should be made with caution, or perhaps be deferred until there was no possibility of life. 8 physicians assisted in performing the autopsy, and they issued a signed statement at its conclusion, stating that death was due to rupture of the aorta, the trunk line of the arterial system. This indicated, according to the coroner, that death primarily was due to natural causes, that the man probably had been suffering for some time from an aneurysm. Death was practically instantaneous and evidently occurred just as Simpson was coming out of the trance. Whether the strain he was put under when Everton stood on the body during its rigidity caused the rupture cannot be ascertained. The result of the autopsy will more than likely bring about Everton's release on bail.